I am Dr. M.P. Changappa, working as an assistant professor at WBU NUJS, Kolkata. I am going to discuss about industrial waste. Industrial waste considered to be very important the aspect of environmental pollution in India. The industrial waste is very challenging is to dispose this waste. In India, the government of India enacted couple of the legislations in order to tackle this industrial waste. The primary these regulations which deals about how to reuse, mitigate and dispose the industrial waste. Industrial waste is a very larger aspect. Within that, couple of the aspect also falls within the purview of this waste: chemical waste, e-waste, batteries waste. All this waste comes within the purview of hazardous waste in India. Under the Environment Protection Act 1986, central government have been given power to issue regulations. We come across there are more than a dozen of the regulations have been enacted in order to dispose, reuse, recycle industrial waste and other such waste in India. Industrial pollution has been the biggest cause of all major pollutions affecting our environment today. Although pollution can find its source in the prehistoric era when man learnt how to make fire and rear cattle, but this pollution caused back then was degradable, containing and managed by the nature itself. However, ever since the industrial and agricultural revolution, the plant has been burdened with the kinds of pollution which are causing irreversible damage to its ecology. Species are going extinct, generations are being born with inherent physical defects, and even the microbes are undergoing adaptive mutations. This paper deals with the basic concept of industrial pollution and waste, its causes and consequences, and the steps that have been taken by the government to mitigate the damage caused by it. At the end of this paper, the reader will be able to answer what is industrial pollution, what are the major causes of industrial pollution, what are the effect of industrial contamination on the ecology, the concept of hazardous industrial waste, how can the consequences of industrial pollution be remedied. Industrial waste is the waste produced by industrial operations, which includes any substance which is rendered useless during the manufacturing process in chemical factories, industries, laboratories, etc. It can include residue of chemicals, paper, metals and hazardous radioactive materials. The industrial waste is divided into 4 categories: toxic waste, chemical waste, industrial solid waste and municipal solid waste. While some of the industrial waste is easily treatable and biodegradable waste generated from heavy industries needs specialized treatment systems. Industries are the sources of all major pollutions, including air, water, land and noise. There are at least 18 industries which have been identified as the biggest sources of pollution. They are inter alia: paper, refineries, paints, pesticide, fertilizer, leather, paints, drug found, batteries, etc. Undiscerned use of pesticide caused 3,000 casualties in Tamil Nadu and nearly 400 in Maharashtra in 1971. Deforestation, acid rain, water pollution, depletion of fresh water sources, death of marine life are some of the visible scares that industrial pollution has left on the face of ecology. It is considered very dangerous. Most of the environmental pollution and at 2 factors which have the resources to devise its remedy. Industrial air pollution amongst the major pollutants contributed by the industries: sulfur dioxide, suspended participate matters, cement dust, glass and asbestos, plant toxic gases, chemical industries, radioactive waste harm the animals, plant and human being on a regular basis, considering the narrower gap between industrial and habitants space. It is a common knowledge now that prolonged inactivities causes lot of respiratory the problem to the human being. Environmental consequences like acid rains and etc. Results lot of environmental harm to the country. Pollution in cities like Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata are much more than New York, Chicago or London, even though the former cities use fewer automobiles than the later. Mumbai has high level of pollutant causing from the industries, industrial sewage, etc. The temperature inversion in Delhi occurs frequently during the winter owing to the accumulation of pollutant in air as much as the use of industrial necessary for progress of the countries, the environment is necessary for the survival of inhabitants. Now, the state pollution control boards have adopted the practice of arranging the industries in order of the severity of their pollution and regulating the pollution of those industries which are above the other in the hierarchy. For example, the Andhra Pradesh SPCB found out that by regulating the pollution level of 13 out of 133 unit in Hyderabad, by regulating the pollution level of 13 out of 133 unit in Hyderabad, more than 90% of the total volume of the industrial waste water can be controlled. Such studies reveal that pollution control is no colossus, but years after ignorance and recklessness has made it so. Bhopal gas disaster. Industrial accidents not a new phenomena, but they have been consciously overlooked by us. Bhopal gas disaster is considered one of the world's worst industrial disaster, which affected almost 5,000 people who were exposed to the gas called methane. An estimated 3,800 people died immediately after the gas leak and 800 more deaths were speculated 2 weeks later. The gas leak happened in December 1984 from a pesticide plant of the Union Carbide India Limited. The after effect of the accident still persist in the shanty towns that surrounded the plant, while theories like corporate negligence and employee sabotage were purported to discover the actual cause of the tragedy. John Elliot of the statement UK rightly attributed to causes to a blend of corporate hubris and managerial incompetence. The reason of the Bhopal disaster was the ignorance of important considerations like plant was badly designed from the safety perspective, which included absence of computerized warning system which were installed in the sister plant in native Virginia. The company employed people who are not adequately qualified for the job, since qualified individual would not agreed to work in place with an appalling security setup. Company resorted to unethical economic measures which included retrenchment of laborers, unattended equipments which needed maintenance, which led to closing down of the chilling plants, which could have otherwise slowed down the chemical reactions. The company also allegedly disregarded the warning given by its employees, journalists, people inhabiting the neighboring areas, and its own experts. One of the biggest failure was on the part of the government, which approved the site of the plant from the old city in spite of the law that such plants shouldn't be located within the perimeters of 25 kilometers from the habitable space. Industrial waste pollution is a known to us all that in the last 2 decades. Indian industries have expanded exponentially, and a lot of new chemical substances have been introduced in the environment. This has given rise to the most dangerous category of waste called the hazardous waste. The residue from the chemical industries combine with the elements present in air, water, and on the land, giving rise to non-biodegradable waste products, which pose direct threat to the marine and terrestrial life. Sadly, the generation of waste is directly proportional to the number of process industries, and each industry has multiple manufacturing unit within itself. The most direct effect of such factories is visible on the streams and river in the adjacent towns and cities. While a reasonable amount of waste generated from these industries can be harmlessly absorbed by the healthy streams, the discriminate chemical discharges reduce the oxygen levels of the waste, making it fatal for the marine life and offensive to the human organs, particularly the skin, eyes, and nose, besides affecting the health of the marine and human life, including industrial water waste also destroy the aesthetic and economic value of fresh water. River are a sources of drinking water for many towns and cities, and it is economically cumbersome for the industries to repurity the sources of polluted water for consumption. It is also significant to point out that discharge of inflammable liquid in the sewage pipes leads to sewage explosions, which leads to the aesthetic deterioration of the adjacent stream and land. There are countless other consequences of discharge of industrial waste in water bodies. An indiscriminate pollution of the streams and river can render the water permanently unfit for irrigational purposes. It will result into the corrosion of ships and docks and might interfere with the navigational activities owing to the sludge which would accumulate at the river bed. There is only so much a river can absorb in terms of chemical, toxic and organic waste. The limit to their dilution by the water body will depends upon the quantum and quality of waste discharged. Thus, the industries need to ensure that all the waste produced by them should be effectively prevented to some level before it is released in the streams. E-waste. Since the 1990s, India has undergone a major shift in its market patterns and gone to become a more open and global economy from being a controlled and open one. The direct effect of this shift was first seen on the telecom and IT industry, the two sectors which were also responsible for the rapid urbanization across the country. The growth of the computer industry has mainly been the rapid pace of industrialization coupled with the use of technology in systems application. The consequences of the increasing quantum of electrical appliances being discarded is the generation of a new environmental hazard called the e-waste. Although there is no standard definition of e-waste, the Basel Action Network has defined it as e-waste encompasses a broad and growing range of electronic devices ranging from large households devices such as refrigerator, air conditioner, cell phones, personal stores and consumer electronics to computers which have been discarded by their users. However, the growth of e-waste in India has not been documented well in the last decade. The volume of e-waste generated can only be estimated by dynamic factors like the growth of the IT industry and the life of the manufactured products. Currently, e-waste is mainly generated in OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, since their market is saturated with electronic equipments. Even though the Basel Convention prescribes the transboundary trade of e-waste, it finds its way through donations in schools and colleges. India ratified the convention on 24th June 1992 and has implemented the objectives of the convention through the various judicial precedent. The Ministry of Environment and Forest under the rule making power conferred on it vide the Environmental Protection Act 1986, promulgated the Hazardous Waste Management and Handling Rules 1989, which required authorization from the state pollution control boards for collecting, receiving, treating, transporting, storing and disposing hazardous waste in a state. These rules prohibited the import of hazardous waste in India, but did not include e-waste in the 18 categories of waste that they specified. However, they were amended in 2000 and 2003, covering the electrical and electronic waste within the ambit of hazardous waste. Although India tried to incorporate the guidelines of the Basel Convention while expanding its list of hazardous waste, it paid very little attention to the regulation and management of e-waste generated within its boundaries. While in some countries e-waste is also categorized as a municipal solid waste owing to the hazardous electronic waste generated on the municipal level. In India, there is no such classification, and the municipal solid waste rules 2000 do not apply on the e-waste generated domestically. India was in a dire need of legislation which would deal with the escalating risk of e-waste. It tried to address the problem through various awareness campaigns organized by the central and state pollution control board and the hazardous waste management rules drafted and amended over the years. E-waste management rules 2016. The latest addition to this initiative of waste management was made in April 2016 in the form of e-waste management rules 2016, which not only expanded the scope of hazardous waste but also lay down clearer guidelines with regard to the responsibilities and liabilities of the states and the individuals towards regulation, recycle and reuse of e-waste. The rules lay down a precise definition of e-waste and lay down guidelines to ensure that it is managed in a way that is least detrimental to our environment. Some of the noteworthy features of the aforementioned rules are as under. The rules include within their ambit manufacturer, dealer and producer responsibility organization. In addition to the list in schedule 1 of the 2011 rules, the 2016 rules also include components, consumables and other compact etc. containing lamps are also included within the ambit of the rules. Collection of e-waste is now exclusively the responsibility of the producer, for which they do not require and authorization. The rules also introduce the responsibilities of the state government to ensure safety, health and skill development of the workers which are involved in the recycling of the waste on ground level. When you look at the legal regime governing the management of hazardous waste, as I said that hazardous waste falls within the various categories of waste management rules in India. Legal framework, bird eye view. When you look at the hazardous waste in India, couple of the regulations we come across with regard to this the aspect. The central government, by virtue of Environmental Protection Act, issued couple of the rules and regulations in order to dispose, reuse, recycle entire the waste management, primarily hazardous waste management, handling and transboundary movement rules 2008 have been redrafted by the central government after India ratified the Basel Convention. Manufacturing, storage, import of hazardous chemical rules 1989, hazardous microorganism rules 1989, biomedical waste management and handling rules 1998, recycled plastic manufactured and use rules 1999, batteries manufacturing handling rules 2001. All these rules which imposed responsibility on the part of the occupier to dispose the product properly. Hazardous waste management, handling and transboundary movement rules 2008. These rules replaced old rules of hazardous waste management handling rule 1989. All these rules emphasized on reuse, recycle and reduce the hazardous waste. Therefore, after India became party to Basel Convention, there is a restriction as to the movement of the hazardous waste. Without the approval of the central government, no person is allowed to import any hazardous waste into India. Same way, no person is allowed to export the hazardous waste to the countries without the prior permission of those importing countries. Therefore, when you look at various legal regime from the constitutional perspective, legal perspective, one thing is very clear that we have couple of the regulatory mechanism with regard to the management of the waste. Primarily all these waste management rules which avoids, minimize waste, recycling, safe disposal of waste, integrated waste management and incineration of hazardous waste in various the manner. Finally, the government came out with hazardous and other waste management and transboundary movement rules 2016. The Ministry of Environment Affairs updated the hazardous waste management rules 2011 under the Environmental Protection Act on April 5, 2016. This rules includes in other ambit total of 7,700 municipal towns and includes other waste which were not there in the 2011 rules. The rules have also made a clear distinction between the hazardous waste and other wastes. According to the 2016 rules, other waste include worn out tires, paper waste, metal, scrap, used electronic, etc., which can be conveniently reused and recycled. The rule allows the municipalities to levy fine on the individuals for littering and non-segregation of waste. Under the rule, the waste generation have been entrusted with the responsibility of segregating the waste into 3 categories before handling them over the rack packers. These are wet waste, biodegradable waste, dry waste, plastic, paper, metal, wood, etc. Domestic hazardous waste. One of the biggest criticism that the 2016 rules has to face was that even though the government has banned the import of plastic waste, the permission to import used e-waste in a situation where India already generates around 17 lakhs tons of waste every year will contribute to a 5% increase in this figure. Finally, to conclude, when you look at all these rules and regulations, responsibility have been imposed on Pollution Control Board to implement these regulations properly, and at the same time it is the responsibility on the part of the occupier of industry to comply with these rules properly. Even if therefore we can conclude that there is a need to implement these rules so that there should be proper disposal of hazardous waste. Now, lot of significance has been given to the management and disposal of the waste in India. Couple of the other Supreme Court decision, Almitra Patel versus Union of India, also one of the leading the decision of the Supreme Court, in addition to the Vardichand versus Municipal Corporation Kanpur, wherein both the cases Supreme Court directed the local self-government to perform their constitutional mandate to dispose the waste properly. Therefore, there is a need to proper implementation of these legislations in order to dispose the waste very properly. This is the end of the session. Thank you.